Uh, Good morning to you all. Frankly, this was unprecedented and unexpected for you and for me. I had never even thought that we would be having a class like this. Nevertheless, we always have new experiences to get and keep with us so that we can use them in future in life. And this lockdown and this COVID-19 threat is another such experience. But frankly, I don't hope that this comes back in any shape ever in our lives and in the future, eternally. Now, to go to today's discussion. We have for today's discussion course number ENG 402, option A, Literature of the Indian Subcontinent, Fiction and Non-Fiction in English, unit number 2, Rajmohan's Wife by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. Frankly, I've forgotten, it may be unit number 1 also. I'm not certain. Now, I expect that you have gone through whatever little learning material I have been able to make available to you in the university website. And this presentation is partly culled from that university website uploaded learning material and has additional information. And I hope you will find enough space to develop your ideas from there. Now, this is my first online class with you in the fourth semester. And I thank the university authorities, especially our Honorable Vice Chancellor, for making this kind of an interaction possible between you and us, which at least bridges the gap between us in some way. Now, this discussion today will focus on Rajmohan's Wife, as I have told you. I am trying to, here we are. This is for your further reading, and this reading list is also there in the learning material in the website. Today's discussion shall focus on 4 heads: the age, which is late 19th century, pre-partition Bengal; the author, number 2; number 3, the text, in which there will be the history of its composition, its availability, etc. And finally, the women in the novel. Let us admit 3 of your friends who are waiting. All right. Now, I found this very interesting piece of information in a Calcutta University publication. The title of that publication is The History of Bengal, 1757 to 1905. And it has been edited by one of the foremost professors in the university. His name is Narendra Krishna Sinha. And on page 518, we have this piece of information which I have made available to you by way of a quotation. The first novel ever written by a Bengali in his own language of English, entitled A Journal of 48 Hours of the year 1945, written by Kailash Chandra Datta, who is Toru Datta's uncle, was published in D.L. Richardson's Calcutta Literary Gazette of 6th June 1835. And we know that Rajmohan's Wife was published serially in the journal called Indian Field in 1864. So long before Rajmohan's wife, there was a novel written by Kailash Chandra Dutt. I don't know why this has been missed, but I found this while doing research for your class uh, in the past couple of days. So, this is a piece of information which I thought I should share with you. Now, we come back to the four components which we plan to discuss today. The first one, the age, which is late 19th century Bengal, undivided Bengal. What I will be mentioning here are just leads to further research or study. Here, I may remind you that I have discussed in detail in the class before the suspension of classes and the subsequent lockdown the three aspects related to dacoits. The first one, how they operated. The second, how the British government laid down in the Indian Penal Code special legal and penal provisions for handling these bandits who were unique to India and especially to this part of the country. And number three, how they were represented in literature in two ways. The first one, in real life experiences, like in Suniti Devi's very interesting collection of short stories, and in fictional narratives, as in Rajmohan's wife. Now, in the late 19th century Bengal, we find certain features about which we already know. Now, I will digress slightly over here. I have been watching certain YouTube videos on Rajmohan's wife, including the one sponsored by the University Grants Commission, and I found that we, you and I, are at an advantageous position because that YouTube video is for an pan Indian student listener group where the Bengali culture has to be explained in quite some detail to the auditors. I saw a book of an edition of Rajmohan's wife on which the cover picture is that of a possibly Rajasthani lady. So that lady is actually wearing a choli, a kurti, and a ghagra. So you see, these cultural signifiers sometimes become difficult for an understanding of a text. Now, as far as you and I are concerned, we do not have this problem. So, in the late 19th century Bengal, what are the things that we can observe as far as a study of Rajmohan's wife is concerned? There are changes in society going on which were evident, and these changes were primarily because of the British Raj in India. Kolkata, by virtue of being the capital and the center of the British governance, was the hub of social activity, and it centered on, now this is very important, an interface of the traditional ethnic indigenous culture with the westernized culture of the British. So, this interface is exceptionally important for the appearance of the creation of the novel Rajmohan's Wife and whatever it contains. The next point was the results of this interface were multidimensional and there was hardly any sphere of life and pursuits of persons which were left untouched by this interference. And among these was literature. Literature was therefore influenced by it also. Now, it is interesting to note that women in India gradually began to be beneficiaries of this interface between the traditional indigenous culture and the Western culture that arrived in the wake of the British Raj. What happened? Schools for girls began to appear with the sole purpose of promoting women's formal education. Schools which were brought up by private individuals, by Christian missionaries, by a person like Sister Nivedita, all well wishers who wanted women to rise in their social status from recipients of whatever was doled out to them by a strictly patriarchal system to independent, free individuals had gone ahead with uh, bringing up schools as formal institutions of learning. So, gradually, women began to appear outside the zanana, which is the Ondor Mahal, and interact freely with men. And for this, we must acknowledge the fact that the Brahmo Samaj, to which Raja Rammohan Roy belonged, to which the Tagore family of Kolkata belonged, it played a significant role in this matter. So, as a result, women became more aware of their role outside society beyond the parameters of the household. Now, Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay had begun his formal education in an English medium school, very proud for us, in Midnapur. After that, his father, who was a deputy magistrate, moved from place to place where his posting took him. And Bankim Chandra continued his formal education in the English language, went on to study in Hooghly Mohsin College, and then in the University of Calcutta, where he was one of the first batch of graduates with BA. Therefore, Bankim Chandra was exceptionally well versed in the English language for two reasons. One, his father's post position, which made the family rub shoulders with the British officers and officials, and number two, his formal training in the English language. So, with an exposure to learning in the English language and reading English literature, he read plenty of English novels as a result, and with his keen observation in the gradual changes in the social position of women that were coming about, he decided to create the characters in Rajmohan's life that were. So, we have a wonderful portrait gallery of different women characters belonging to different social strata in Rajmohan's wife. From here, then, we move on to the second component of our discussion, the author himself, Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. As one of the creators of 19th century Bengali culture, not only literature, he had a tremendous contribution to the Bengali culture. He also had some characteristic features. Some of them are that he came from the educated middle class, as I told you. He made money in government employment, like many other authors writing in the Bengali language during his time. He had a formal Western education in the English medium. He took pains to learn Sanskrit also, and this Sanskrit learning, reading, enabled him to understand the significance of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, the learning from which made him conceptualize the practicality of Nishkam Karmojog and Nishkam Karmotattva, about which Krishna advises Arjuna. And this Nishkam Karmojog and Nishkam Karmotattva were the basis of two of his very obvious novels, depending on this kind of practical application of Nishkam Karmojog. the first being Anandamath, the second Devi Chaudhurani, which he wrote later in his life. So he imbibed the legacy of ancient India at the same time. So in Bankim Chandra, we find a confluence of Western exposure to Western culture and education, and an inherent upbringing in an Indian, a typical upper middle class Bengali milieu, where traditional Indian values were present and were inculcated by him. Therefore, his acquaintance of Western literature and the Hindu Shastras find combination in his work. Now, as a novelist, he focused mainly on the drama of human life and the intricate psychology of these human beings who are represented in his novels, for which he creates settings which are sometimes pseudo historical, like the novels of Walter Scott, who had influenced him tremendously, as a result of which some of his critics call him the Scott of Bengal. But he was also influenced by 18th century English fiction, like those written by Richardson and Fielding, primarily, not so much Smollett. So his women characters are influenced by those women characters in the novels of the 18th century. So you have an accommodation of a picaresque character like, say, Becky Sharp in Bengali literature. But someone like Becky Sharp cannot be identically reintroduced into Bengali literature, because in the Bengali social scenario, such behavioral patterns cannot be accommodated. So, necessary accommodations, necessary alterations were there in Bankim Chandra's mind, because he was very aware, because of his position as a deputy magistrate, of the social scenario and the acceptability of whatever he would choose to write in his fictional works. From there, then, we move on to the text of Rajmohan's wife. He was transferred from his posting in Khulna as deputy magistrate to Baruipur on the 5th of March 1864, and we get this information from the Calcutta Gazette of 9th March 1864. So just a few days later, it has been notified in the Gazette that Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay has been officially transferred from his posting in Khulna in the then undivided Bengal to Baruipur, which is closer to his home in Noihati. Rajmohan's Wife was published serially in the same year in Indian Field, a magazine. Now, Chatterjee did not wish to publish it in book form. He did not do it. But what he did was to try and translate it in Bengali. So he attempted to rewrite the novel in Bengali, and he gave it a new title. The title of the Bengali version, which he attempted to write, was called Bari Bahini. Excuse me. He translated the first 7 chapters of the book, and after that, he gave up the project. So the matter ended there with him. Then he passed away, and Rajmohan's Wife was nearly forgotten, because by then he had established himself as a very successful novelist writing in the Bengali language, and he wrote novel after novel in Bangla. But in 1978, Satish Chandra Chattopadhyay discovered this unfinished manuscript and decided to finish it, because by then Bankim Chandra was an established name, and any writing of his found to be unpublished and then edited and published would be a success in the commercial market. So, presumably, because of this, Satish Chandra Chattopadhyay completed it according to his own imagination and subsequently published it in book form. After that, we have to wait till 1935 when Brojendranath Bandyopadhyay came across very accidentally a compilation of the available volumes of Indian Field. And in that compilation, I call it the available volumes because this compilation was not complete. As a result, the first three chapters of Rajmohan's wife, which were included in three other volumes, because those volumes were not there in these compilations, those chapters were also not there. So these missing chapters were absolutely not there, and the rest of the novel was there for Brojendranath Bandyopadhyay. So, what could be done? For the last three chapters, the first three chapters of the novel, Brojendranath Bandyopadhyay translated back the first three chapters from Satish Chandra Chattopadhyay's book of Paribahini. And in this form, it was published from Provashi in 1935. Now to look at the novel. What does it contain? The staple of the novel comprises rural zamindari, the cycle of the court, the lawyer, the property disputes, and lawsuits which emerge because of these disputes, and how people have to go to the court and spend money for keeping their or retrieving their property. So, this is another important aspect to be found in the novel. The depraved zamindar who has a very bad habit of setting eyes upon other people's daughters and wives and abducting them for his own pleasures. This was also another vice in the then Bengali society. The malicious relatives who always wait to prey upon the very good intentions of a rich zamindar, a devoted wife, an indomitably faithful wife, both to be found in Matongini, the capricious second wife, the exceptionally amazing band of maids, and the country dacoit. Now, all these are very common features of 19th century Bengali domestic and social life, and they are to be found in the novel. So, when Bankim Chandra was thinking about creating the plot and the theme of his novel, he depended on, as expected, his knowledge of a typical Bengali society, thereby representing it to both the British and the Bengali readership who had the expertise or the training of reading the English language. And the English language which he uses in his novel is of a very good standard. There are hardly any blemishes in the language he uses for his novel. So, as I have already pointed out in my interactions with you, all these iconic issues reappear in the subsequent Bengali novels that he wrote. And Rajmohan's Wife is a novel of domestic romance, just as Conrad's Heart of Darkness is an adventure romance in an inverted or subverted form. This one is a domestic romance which he was attempting in the English language. In this novel, there are 21 chapters, followed by a brief conclusion. Each chapter has a title And this is a tendency which recurs in some of his subsequent Bengali novels too, like Durgesh Nandini, Kapal Kundola, Mrinalini, Bishbrikho, Indira, Chandrasekhar, Raj Singho, and maybe a few others. Now, as I have said, this novel bears the mark of the future success of Bankim Chandra Chatterjee as a novelist, albeit in Bengali. He had told Srish Chandra Chattopadhyay, and this is my translation of what he said in Bangla, that to him, speaking and writing continuously in English was easier than doing so in Bengali. This can be found in Bonkim Babu Proshongo. This is an excerpt from that Calcutta University publication by Professor Narendra Krishna Sinha, who edited it, and there are excellent essays over there. Over there, on page 524, it is written that Bonkim Chandra's very first sally in fiction was in the English medium. His novel, Rajmohan's Wife, written when he was 27, completed in 1863, was published serially in 1864 in the weekly periodical The Indian Field, edited by Kishori Chand Mittu. It is a clumsy story. Now, this is what the critic has got to say. It is a clumsy story of a spirited and pretty woman being married to a rascal, leaving a good man whose properties are, loving a good man whose properties are threatened by robbers in association with his relatives. And of course, at the end, we have triumph of virtue and downfall of vice. I skip a few words. It is possible to find several motifs in Rajmohan's Wife which recur in the later Bengali novels, and perhaps the technique of the dialogue is already distinguished for its verve, but this morning of an English novel shows the day of the Bengali novels in only the thinnest outline. So that is what the critic has got to say about this novel. Now I move on to the fourth component of our discussion, the women in the novel. And this is the list of the women in the novel. Obviously, at the top would be Matangini and her Shoi, her friend Konok, Rajmohan's aunt, Hemangini, Madhav's maternal aunt, who actually serves as the housekeeper of Madhav's home, Ombika, Srimati, Koruna, Suki's mother, these are the maids, Tara and Champak, the two wives of Mothur. More or less, these are the important women, characters who appear in the novel. Apart from this, you have Rajmohan's sister, who is a peripheral character. We move on now to Matungini, the protagonist of Rajmohan's wife. It's very interesting that the title of the novel is Rajmohan's wife and not Matungini, although the two are the same person. But the novelist Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay did have a definite purpose in giving this particular title to his debut novel in English. Matangini, in the beginning of her life before she was married, was just another ordinary girl who was extremely beautiful, who was extremely graceful, and was brought up in keeping with the social and familial expectations of late 19th century Bengal. So there was nothing extraordinary in Matangini before she got married, about which we come to know in a later chapter of the novel. Her first presentation anticipates Chattopadhyay's method in his subsequent Bengali novels. If you read Bankim Chandra's later novels in Bengali, you will find that every time the Naika or the lady who is the heroine is presented to the audience for the first time, there is an elaborate description of the lady after the fashion of Sanskrit literature, particularly that of, say, Kalidasa. In a very kabbik manner, the lady is described in all her beauty, in all her gracefulness, in all her personal accomplishments, as possessing integrity and dignity of character. So the same for Matongini. That is why Rajmohan's wife anticipates his later novels in Bangla. Therefore, through her, Bankim Chandra seems to attempt a revival of Dharma. And you must see that Dharma here is written in italics, in the ancient sense of an ethical way of life. আমাদের জীবনে, when we talk about dharma, it is not religion only. In fact, religion is a kind of packaging of the dharma of life, which is enshrined in the four ashramas. And in each ashram, there is a dharma which an individual is expected to follow and imbibe, so that the next ashram becomes meaningful in the life of that individual. So you have your Manav Dharma, you have your Jati Dharma, you have your Niti Dharma. There are many dharmas which are brought together in an individual and which shape the activities, which shape the intentions, which shape the character of an individual. In that way, if you look at Madhov, then he would be a man who is more in keeping with the idea of dharma that Bankim Chandra would like to uphold in his fictional work. And to him serve as foils his cousin Mothur and, of course, Rajmohan. There are the dacoits too. So the other men in the novel are actually foils to the character of Madhov. Madhov is the ideal man, the others are aberrations of what happens when dharma palon, or abiding by dharma, or observation or practice of dharma is not done. Now to get back to Matongini. A tender beginning, a wild abandon in her love for Madhov, the bitter disillusionment of romantic passion in her marriage to Rajmohan, and of course, when she sees that Madhav is there but not for her, finally, her realization of her duty towards her own self, towards her sister, towards society, make her a sublimated character, and the glory of this sublimation is communicated through the novel. Now, if you are a feminist, then you will wish to argue that by this method, Bankim Chandra was pointing towards a code of conduct which he would expect in a woman. That is true, and that I leave open for discussion and maybe a paper presentation if you want to. You can even write an essay, and we can see whether we can publish these after the lockdown period is over. Now to get back, he therefore represents self control for happiness. And here you can take a look at the first chapter of the text. Besides, as in the case of most Brahmin families, and they were all Brahmins in this novel, her father, I mean the lead characters, say Rajmohan, Matongini, Madhav, Mathur, Tara, Champak, Mathur's relatives are all Brahmins. Again, you could have a Marxist criticism of this novel to show how the dacoits, who are apparently non Brahmin, who may even belong to the Dalit categories, are being employed and exploited by wicked persons like Madhav for their own personal gains. So that social stratification and a complex social exploitation is also embedded in Rajmohan's wife. Besides, as in the case of most Brahmin families, her father was a poor man with two daughters who had to be married off quite fast and could not afford a dowry. So he would have to find suitable grooms for each of his daughters, and it was very difficult for a poor man to go ahead and find grooms for his daughters. So there was this wicked man like Rajmohan who was just waiting for an opportunity because he was older, much older than Matongini, but he had an eye on her and he wanted her as his wife. So he seized upon the poverty of her father and went ahead through an agent to propose marriage to her. The poor father had no option but gave away his daughter in marriage to Rajmohan. Her father was compelled to marry her to Rajmohan, and you can get this from chapters 4, 6, and 10 of the text. From Mukherjee's introduction to the Penguin edition of the book Rajmohan's Wife, which is a very good introduction. From this book, you can get to see what she writes. Inscribed in the text, we also find an early statement about the helplessness and claustrophobia of women in incompatible marriages. So, that is another feminist discourse which can be triggered off from here. Mukherjee points out that this would be the staple of many future works in Indian English. Till here, Matangini was an ordinary girl, but Bankim Chandra had different ideas for her. He made her different. How did he make her different? Her different appearance begins with her marriage to Rajmohan. She, like any other typical Bengali girl, like the ladies here and me even today, have lots of hopes, dreams, expectations about an ideal married life, at least a basic minimum. But when that is not met, বাংলায় যাকে বলে দেয়ালে পিঠ থেকে যাওয়া, এরকম একটা পরিস্থিতি তৈরি হয়। And then there is the conflict between a lot of reality events, experiences which suddenly appear before her. She has been brought up in a milieu with a kind of training in which it is expected, and this is deeply rooted in her. She cannot get out of this, that she cannot fall from the status of a quote unquote good woman. And yet, the husband is a fallen man. How will she cope with this kind of a situation? So when Rajmohan's wife opens, Matangini has already come to realize and accept the fact that Rajmohan is not a good man. But there is still a piece of very, very disappointing information which she does not know, and that is his association with the dacoits in capacities more than one. He is their informer, he is the keeper of their loot, he is deeply associated with them. And when this association comes to jeopardize or threaten the man whom she loves and admires, her sister's husband, Madhav's personal life, Matangini becomes a different woman. So, to get back to the slide, this marriage changes Matangini, who was groomed to be a submissive and docile wife. But Rajmohan was an out and out villain. And you get this from chapter 4. Being Rajmohan's wife made all the difference. And that is why the title of the novel is not Matangini but Rajmohan's wife. It is as Rajmohan's wife that Matangini becomes what she is represented as in the novel. This was Bankim Babu's plans for the protagonist of his first novel ever written. Being a very intelligent woman, she knows what family and society expect from her. She knows how to respect others. But this knowledge, this training, is met with a variety of obstacles, all posed by her husband, the man towards whom it was expected by society as well as by herself that she would be a pativrata. But to be a pativrata now itself turned out to be a challenge for Matungini. And if she would be a pativrata, then it meant that she would have to accept and admit all the errors, both on the personal level, on the social level, on the legal level that he was committing. And this was something Matungini refused to admit to. And herein, Bonkim Chandra makes her emerge as a woman who will not submit to the wrongdoings of her husband. And this is the Indian new woman who emerges from this novel. So she knows that she should not allow wrongdoing and unjust practices, particularly when the well being of her sister Hemangini and her husband Madho, with whom she had a youthful affair before she was married to Rajmohan, are concerned. So, what do we see? We find that the way in which Rajmohan behaves with her and how she responds to him actually are the basis on which the character of Matongini develops in the course of the novel. Her practical sense and intelligence are revealed in the tension packed eavesdropping episode, chapter 6, and thus she does what in the 19th century Bengal would be considered outrageous for a woman of her social status. She she has a vital role. The way in which that is what she does. I'm sorry. And to get back, her vital role in averting the dacoity in Madhuv's house, especially the robbing of the important document, which is the will, is there. Her exceptional courage and common sense, which enable her to escape certain death in chapter 11, is there. She is given shelter by Tara, the elder of Mathur's two wives, is there. But her inability to see through Suki's mother's cunning and its consequences is also there. Now, this is somewhat like Hardy's novels, where chance and coincidence have to be introduced into the plot in order to make the narrative continue. Ultimately, what Bonkim Chandra was aiming at, as you can um, understand from a retrospection of the way in which he must have conceptualized the plot construction of the novel, that he wanted Madhov and Matungini to be held as captives in the same place without one's knowledge of the presence of the other. And this would add to that domestic romance element of the novel. And therefore, the abduction of Madhov is understandable, but the disappearance of Matongini and the strange noises overhead in the warehouse or the godown where Madhav was kept are somewhat made mysterious until we discover who was making those noises. So, that element is, of course, a purposeful introduction on the part of the novelist to give you that kind of titillating feeling of this very delicate, romantic yet respectful interaction and relation between these two characters, the Boro Shalika and the Choto Boner husband, the Bhognipoti. So that is also there. Uh, 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 this is later related in the narrative. Now, again, we go back to a quote from Tutun Mukherjee, in which, I'm sorry, Meenakshi Mukherjee, in which she mentions that this is page 8 of the introduction of the book. Given the rigidness of the power structure within the family among upper caste Bengalis in the 19th century, it seems surprising that the first Indian novel in a contemporary setting should have focused um, on a woman of uncommon vitality who refused to be completely subjugated either by her brutal husband or by the expectations of society. So, Matangini's unrequited love for her own sister's husband is presented with authorial sympathy, according to Meenakshi Mukherjee. Mukherjee also goes on to say that the abruptness and the ambivalence of the ending may be the result of an anxiety such women of energy generated by posing a threat to the social order and creating a moral dilemma for the author. So, all this is from the introduction. Now we turn to the other women in the novel, and I shall just mention them in passing. There is Konok, Matongini Shoi, who lives next door, and whose appearance is that in the novel as the first human being, as the first individual who appears in the novel. You have Rajmohan's aunt, who is very protective and loving towards Matongini. You have Matongini's sister Hemangini, Madhav's maternal aunt, who is a widow and who looks after the domestic chores of the household. There is Ombika, Srimati, Koruna. There is Suki's mother. And of course, there is the very imposing character of Tara and a very interesting character of a very telemanushi kora kintu khub chalak bou Champak, the typical duorani. So that is there. So I end with that, with a proposal that some of you are very good play script writers. So you can write a script on any one episode of your choice in Rajmohan's Wife for performance in the department's cultural program. Cultural program now under the COVID-19 threat in again a bit uh, uh, we don't know whether we'll be able to go ahead with one, but expecting that we will soon get back to normalcy, I propose that you prepare. And I end there with a word of thanks to all of you for your patient listening. Now you can unmute your microphones and one by one add to what I have said or ask questions which I shall try to answer.
Madam,
This is
hello.
Viti Vandana, I assume. Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Hello.
Yes, please.
Hi, yes, ma'am.
Okay, you have the book.
Okay.
Thank you.
Actually, yeah, yes, I have the book. Yeah,
Okay.
you pointed out Heart of, you point out Heart of Darkness as a adventure romance.
Hmm.
So actually, I want to know that the very word romance is something associated to love or affair like that. Is it so?
No, romance. No, that would be romantic in the
Okay.
context of a novel. But romance is a
Okay.
genre in which there is an imaginary situation
Hmm.
and there are characters who pay a visit there. So the author, the reader, is transported to the world of that created in the fiction, that fictional imaginary world, and the experiences of whoever goes to that world is then shared by the reader. So it is removed, but not greatly removed. It should be within the range of understanding of the reader. Anything to do with Rajmohan's Wife?
Yes, actually, the domestic romance means that particularly art form.
Will you repeat yourself?
Hello,
Yes, your audio is getting disturbed. Will you repeat yourself?
Rajmohan. Yes, yes, ma'am. So you point out Rajmohan's Wife as domestic romance.
Hmm.
So as domestic romance, actually, it gives the platform of imaginary platform for domestic romance.
See, the
Hello.
household, the social setting are familiar. But this relation
Yes.
between Matangini and Madhav in the presence of Hemangini and their
Yes.
interface in Hemangini's bed chamber when she goes to pass on information about the impending dacoity. That is one of a very good example of this kind of romance. This kind of setting, a situation, is repeated in the subsequent novels in Bangla written by Bankim Chandra again and again. So he seems to be a master of representing this kind of very interesting and exciting interfaces between the protagonist and the other person who may have possibilities or who has possibilities of a romantic interaction with that person. Any other question by any other student participant?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, who are you?
Ma'am, Subhadip.
Okay, Shubhadeep.
Hello.
Hello. What is your question?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, as Bankim Chandra was writing this novel in the pre-colonial period, so
No, it is
I
the
mean,
colonial
is
period. It is not pre-colonial.
yes. Sorry, ma'am. As
Yes.
it is the colonial period, so I mean, is he showing through Matangini's character that a woman suppressed. I mean, is he comparing the Matangini character to that Indians who are suppressed by the colonizers, or he is going to showing that Matangini is leading to a tragedy type? I mean, what type of character is he is going to show through
Okay.
Matangini?
Now, I told you in the beginning that there is an interface between the Western culture, which is brought by the British Raj, and the traditional indigenous Indian culture. Now, Matangini seems to emerge from here. Bankim Chandra wants to show that in spite of her very little traditional academic training, she is a typical Bengali maid, and in spite of that, by virtue of her intelligence, by virtue of her common sense, she knows what is expected of her from society. But at the same time, now this is new. Till here, she was just another ordinary girl. But what she does by going out in that night, by risking her life, by hiding in the pukur, and by going to Madhav, with whom she had a very delicate relationship before she was married. So she has to overcome so many personal and social obstacles just to save Madhav's house from being raided by the dacoits and to save him from losing his property. This very different venture undertaken by Matungini makes her emerge as a new woman, as a Shahoshini, as a brave young girl. And this is what Bankim Chandra is trying to bring out in all the ordinary girls of Bangla, that they have the potential to stand up and protest. They have the potential to act according to dharma in their own way without breaking any of the codes of genteel or gentle womanly conduct. They can still stand up and support what is dharma, what is true, what is correct. And just compare Matungini with Profullo in Devi Chaudhurani. You will find that the basic tenets in both the characters are the same.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Anyone else? Good to see you, Shubhodip.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Where is
Ma'am, I have a
Tarasankar? Is
question.
he here? Who else?
Ma'am, this side Mousumi. I have a question, ma'am.
Yes.
So, Yes, ma'am, you have just said that this novel can be a reading on Marxist criticism. So, can you please focus a little bit on that issue?
Of course, if you want to go for a Marxist criticism of Rajmohan's wife, you have the okay, a reference to the British occupation of the Bengal area by way of the authorities, the police, the laws, the final sentencing of Rajmohan, all those, and Bhikkhu. So these are pointers towards the very powerful British presence at the top of the social stratification. Then come the jomidars, then come their retainers, then come the other persons in the social order, in which strata you also have the women. And within each strata, the women have their own different positions. So, by this, you can have a Marxist criticism of Rajmohan's wife. You can elaborate on this on the basis of the novel, and then the picture will come out very clearly. I hope I've been able to help you, Moshumi. And if you want to, then you
Yes,
can
ma'am.
go ahead and write an essay.
Yes, ma'am. I want to add something.
Yeah.
That is the way the Dalits, I mean the dacoits. They are not of the Brahmin class. They are the Dalits of the society, and they are trying to rob a man who is from the Brahmin status. That is Madhav. Is not there a sense of reverse exploitation? Or by way of reading the book, I have come across the thing that the dacoits are not of the type of the Robin Hood dacoity. I
No,
mean, they are not looting things for the welfare of the society. They are
no.
just for the sake of the game. So, isn't there a sense of reverse exploitation of the Brahmin class by the Dalits?
Um, you can call it reverse exploitation, but things are not as simple as you would say by using this particular phrase, reverse exploitation. It is reverse exploitation, but it is not that kind of. If you say it is reverse exploitation, what happens is that, let us look at the exploitation first. The zamindars,
Okay.
who were most of them, nearly 99.99% of them, belonged to the upper classes beyond the Dalit status. They were exploitative in every sense of the term, economically, socially, particularly where women were concerned. They exploited the lower rungs of society to their heart's content, and without any kind of obstacle, without any kind of challenge. There was nobody to put them to the test. So that is exploitation meted out by the upper sections of society, even the upper classes, upon the lower sections, including the Dalits. When the dacoits go ahead with a dacoity venture, this exploitation is only financial or related to wealth. In most cases, they did not do any physical harm to the women until and unless they were forced to, because they were more eager to move out with the loot that they could get. Of course, they did indulge in murder. Thus, their way of exploitation cannot be equaled with the way in which the zamindars exploited. And this model, even today, is valid. Excuse me, sometimes you will find in different parts of the world, including, say, what happened during this pandemic situation. Our country was threatened with dire consequences if certain medicines were not doled out to certain other countries. So that is the zamindari kind of technique. Now, if we lash back, then it will be in a very small way, not in the big way in which the big power perpetrates different kinds of threats or different kinds of negative behavioral pattern as far as human relationships are concerned. So this is an eternal paradigm in which the very oppressed lower sections, particularly in society, sometimes are forced to, sometimes are angry, because of which they lash out at the perpetrators of different kinds of oppression upon them. So the dacoits are dacoits by force. Uh, First, they are dacoits by compulsion. You remember that they tell Rajmohan that you come over where we live. So they have their own hub of family existence. They stay away from their family, somewhat like, our migrant labor. So they live among the reeds, but that is not their home. That is their temporary shelter from where they go out on their dacoity expeditions. But they have their homes, they have their families in a different place, which is more or less secure from the rest of the world. So they have a world of their own and they have their own justification.
Thank you. Ma'am, I have one another issue to focus on. That is, there is a class assimilation in the text that is quite positive one. In the era when Bankim Chandra was writing the text, uh, class uh, class distinction was quite a negative influence on Indian society. But he is showing us a society where the dacoits are cooperating with the Brahmin. That is Rajmohan's, who is
Hmm.
also in on his turn is cooperating with the dacoits. Maybe it is for his own personal gain, but he is cooperating with them. So there is no class distinction, and there is also the line in the text that among the dacoits there is no class or creed or any other bar. So can't there be a positive view on a classless society
No, here
regarding the
Bonkim Babu wants to show at the turn of the 19th century, of course, indications. I'm sorry, at the turn of the 20th century, there were indications that those who were enlightened wanted a society without a classification on the basis of caste system. But among the dacoits, the story was different, because all those who were engaged with these dacoity ventures were people who were extremely selfish and ruthless. They had to come together for their own personal gains, and because of which they had to overcome the caste distinctions. And if you want to do something, you always find an excuse for it. So here the unifying factor was ghee. Just as in the Sepoy Mutiny, the unifying factor was the cartridges, that apart, here the unifying factor was ghee. ঘিয়ে তৈরি করা খাবার খেলে কোনো জাতি দোষ হয় না. So ghee was used to cook meals, and everyone partook of it. There was no problem. Now, this is actually a very slight pointer by Bankim Chandra towards the way in which the people who apparently were very strict about the caste system, when they had their own personal aggrandizement to look towards, could also overcome it in their own sly ways. So this is a kind of social comment which he makes over here.
okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, then I think I'll call it off, because okay, one more question, because I have another meeting with the controller of examinations. One more question. Someone said hello. Okay, then I shall stop the meeting here.